Our strategy was developed in response to what happened as a result of Hurricane Katrina. As you can imagine, a storm of that magnitude, most insurance companies took a hit on their reputation. I think because of our exposure in that particular market, we took a pretty big hit. So we decided that we were going to make reputation and reputational engagement a priority. And this started at the top of the house. It started with our CEO, and he organized his senior leadership team around this as an opportunity. So the first thing we began with, our first step, was to identify consistent stakeholder research. That was relatively easy to do because we tapped into Anthony and his team, and they did a fantastic job. The second thing we did was we created a reputation organization within the company. And then the third thing we did was we aligned communication messaging with our stakeholders' expectations. And this was no easy task because, reputation is something that is very fluid. Things were changing, the world was changing, the environment was changing, and certainly as we were looking at things from a post-crisis standpoint, we had a lot of repair to do. And third, we established long-term goals of really integrating reputation insights into our business practices. So as I said, in order for all this to happen, our CEO had to support us. He had to establish the accountability with the senior leadership team with the goal of using this to govern and oversee our reputation strategy. We established this function. It was housed in corporate relations or public relations. It supports, it develops, and it executes. And it has a lot of power within the organization. It isn't one of these things that gets shuffled aside or ignored. And then thirdly, we worked with Reputation Institute to kind of design the systematic approach, which we call our reputation scorecard. So it's our overarching way to view all of our stakeholders, where we stand and what drives them and what drives trust within each group. And it measures our performance on 32 specific attributes, and we survey over 10,000 stakeholders annually. So the outcome of this, and I think this says a lot about Allstate in general, is that we have incorporated reputation risk as part of our enterprise risk management function. And you can imagine risk management in an insurance company is a pretty broad scan and scope of responsibility. And this actually gets reported on a quarterly basis to our audit committee of the board of directors. We have an accountability to our board to report on reputational risk, and we take it very seriously, and we do it each time they meet.
There are very few organizations that are able to resolve a crisis, that is, to achieve their financial and other objectives, and even prevent future crises from happening. We're the ones that build trust with their employees, their customers, and their suppliers. I think one of the most important things that leaders do to continually reinforce that trust, to get people even to follow them in the first place, is that they are able to create and sustain hope. Trust really is at the core of this willingness to be vulnerable. So if the organization is facing a vulnerable situation, or employees are being asked to become more vulnerable by changing, taking risks, those leaders are able to say, but we're going to have a better future if we do this. So that sense of hope and optimism is absolutely critical from a leadership standpoint.
Our strategic planning process for big actions, product, all of that does happen by line of business. We're a commercial bank, but we have commercial banking, retail banking, wealth management, all the different segments. But we do integrate how marketing, communications, and corporate responsibility go into that business strategy, and we do have outcomes measurement that, for my sake at least, depend on reputation outcomes, right? So if we do really well in corporate citizenship, then my bosses are expecting to see upticks in that corporate citizenship dimension within the reputation scores. It's really wonky. So by the way, I'm in total geek heaven here, being able to talk about this stuff in public instead of to myself. We do manage reputation risk centrally. So this is actually where I think a lot of the movement has come in the U.S. So the framework for all this came globally, but how we apply it here really has made a difference for how the company in the U.S. operates. It opened up a lot of eyes, it raised a lot of eyebrows, and it made us ask difficult questions. So it brought in closer to that reputation and trust work we're doing, line of business and other executives that would have typically said, Ray does philanthropy, right? Like that's, your job is to give out money and nothing else. But they now understand it's not just about citizenship, it's everything else that we do.
trustworthiness comes from the things that you choose not to do. In other words, the opportunities that may be available to you, but that you feel will be incompatible with your values or will be unpalatable. And there have been a number of examples. Siemens, who remains to date the biggest ever fine for massive bribery and corruption, but they have done significant things to try to recover their reputation. But one of the things that they did was that they voluntarily withdrew from being able to compete for World Bank funding and World Bank projects for 3 years. And that's a significant impact on their business, but it was a cue, a signal that they were trying to send out that there are opportunities we're going to forego in order to try to demonstrate that we have learned our lesson and we are a different company. We've noticed when we've interviewed employees is that they feel a sense of shame for being associated with a discredited organisation, but many of them will feel completely innocent and that this wasn't me, it was the other people in the other division, and so they want to retain a certain sense of pride. And so there are these two intriguing emotions that are going on at the same time.
One thing that's worked for us, because we lost the trust of our investment group, shareholders after the financial crisis obviously didn't like a lot of the business decisions that had been made. And what we did was we opened our arms up and said complete transparency. And one thing that I think earned us at least halfway back is that we decided to report on our catastrophe results monthly. So we made a commitment to the analysts that follow us that we would provide them with early warning so that they could better predict on their models how we were going to be doing anytime there was a catastrophe charge that was larger than 150 million. And I think by extending the olive branch and opening our arms, it got us halfway there, but it's very slow.
Because there's a lot more information out there, a lot more transparency, whether we like it or not, about how, whether it's government or corporations behave, that at some point, though, all of us absorb it to a sense of normalization, right, where we're like more accustomed to, okay, well, I understand and see who's had, in my field, who's had breaches of data, or who's had, other problems that are now more public and quickly disseminated. I mean, within seconds, everything's completely public, and that's, I think, part of what's leading to this decline in trust or confidence, just because we all know a lot very quickly about pretty much anything, or especially any problem. So I think that what I see, at least, is that primarily there's some aspects of that I think are going to get normalized, where we then process that, the public, and assuming public processes that a little bit better, and then chooses winners or losers in the end, because I think that's the point. So who are they going to spend their holiday cash with? Who are they going to bank with? Who are they going to get insurance from in the end?
There's no accountability anywhere anymore. Imagine a child right now growing up in New York City. There was an article in New York Magazine just last week about what their parents will do to get them into the right school. Lie about where they live. They will help them cheat on the admissions tests. These same parents are telling these kids, be honest, be ethical. That's not where kids learn. They learn by the behavior. So we've just been through the financial crisis. Nobody's in jail. And what do you think consumer belief is right now? That everybody's out there trying to get away with whatever they can get away with, and nothing has changed. So I don't know what the answer is to that, but Shakespeare would say, hang somebody, and then send a signal that the age of inaccountability is over.
There is accountability to be had, but individual consumers is what you're speaking to. And individual consumers are making those everyday choices and are holding us accountable. I mean, whether it's by not buying stock or not banking with particular entities that had really big trouble during the crisis. I mean, I think that those votes are happening with that, what that consumer confidence means. Are you saving? Are you buying? Are you choosing? So I do think that we're getting taxed indirectly. It may not be what you mean, but all of us are being held accountable by consumers more and more every day because of that information.
I would throw out a challenge to those of you who work in the media and say that one of the reasons we don't have any accountability, or maybe competence would be that dimension of trust, where we don't have enough benevolence or compassion is because we're not demanding enough honesty out of our elected officials, other unelected government entities. And there used to be, when it was a simpler world, 3 networks and then the public broadcasting system. Walter Cronkite could then say, I'm sorry, I don't believe in the Vietnam War anymore, I've been over there, and that's when Lyndon Johnson lost the war. When you had a highly trusted journalist willing to call, speak truth to power. And I think most of our media have really failed utterly in demanding simple honesty from the people they interview, the reports that they receive. And I'm a journalism professor for a father. My wife got her PhD in journalism school, and I've almost stopped watching TV as a source of information because I know there's not much truth being represented there.
We talk about intelligent trust, and there are entirely sensible reasons why we shouldn't trust certain individuals and why we shouldn't trust certain organisations. The curriculum will be understanding what trust is, which is ability, benevolence, integrity and predictability, and there are ways in which you can teach people how to pick up on those cues, or at least how to be vigilant toward it, and to make sensible decisions on that basis. And you're entirely right. There are sensible reasons why we distrust, but if we spread distrust and suspicion, we quickly get into paranoia and fear. Whereas I think the objective, or if you like, rather the optimistic agenda is we'll try to find ways in which we can encourage people to be trustworthy and to trust, but to trust sensibly on the basis of sound evidence.